It's March 17th. Happy St. Patty's Day. And President Trump has now personally commented on the Autopen scandal. He also just revoked the pardons of a bunch of criminals inside the Biden regime as well, with this iconic post. Trump saying that Joe Biden's pardons are void, vacant, and of no further force or effect because of the fact that they were done with Autopen. Trump adds that Joe Biden didn't know anything about them, and the people that did might have committed a crime. The Autopen scandal has taken the nation by storm ever since our very own Kara Castronova asked a question about it in the briefing room last week. The day before this, White House presser Gabrielle Kachia had appeared on my show to disclose the identities of the three people who had easy access to Biden's Autopen. But the fact is, we at LindellTV had been on this story for months, way before the corporate media ever uttered the word Autopen. In fact, we broke this story last year on my TV show, The Absolute Truth, when Gabrielle Kachia talked about her time in the White House Executive Clerk's office as she analyzed the mismatching Biden signatures. Here's the show clip. That was July 24th, 2024.
Yes, so that image that you have right here up on the screen where we're deciphering on these five signatures that they're comparing to are actually from executive orders in which the Autopen was utilized. So when you put a human hand to a signature, it's not going to match up to a pre-designated Autopen of which was utilized in those executive orders. Now, the Autopen lives in Office of Records Management. It is foolproof, identical in signature within the White House complex. I've had, like you said, experience in every single time that the president has a signature requirement, if they're not physically present, typically it's taken all the way up into the records management office, and I watch the little pen do its thing and mimic the presidential signature, a vice presidential signature, what have you. So in this case, when you look at those comparisons, that is why it actually does not match up. But then there's that other element too, right? Is that this probably from my last former employment as a security contractor, there are elements of a signature that you would look at that no matter how much you try to obfuscate a signature, there are elements that are just difficult in habit to really hide. So when you do look at the signature, I mean, I would argue that the DNC isn't really hiding too darn hard because of that underlining, right? Like that underlining is in plain sight. It's clear that it's not Joe Biden.
Now, according to Kachia, the Biden regime had three staff secretaries, Neera Tanden, Jessica Hertz, and Stephanie Feldman. And my bet, some of these ladies might have some explaining to do very soon. Joining us now for more on this and how it went down in the briefing room today in regards to questions about Autopen is our own Kara Castronova. She got a few questions, Caroline did today about the Autopen. How'd that go?
She did. I wasn't expecting that. I was actually planning on asking the question myself, but the reporter from CNN beat me to it, and she posed the question in a different way. And Carolyn had a very interesting answer. So here it is.
The president was begging the question that I think a lot of journalists in this room should be asking about whether or not the former president of the United States, who I think we can all finally agree was cognitively impaired. I know it took people some time to finally admit that, but we all know that to be true, as evidenced by his disastrous debate performance against President Trump during the campaign. I digress on that. But the president was raising the point that did the president even know about these pardons? Was his illegal signature used without his consent or knowledge? And that's not just the president or me raising those questions, Caitlin. According to the New York Post, there are Biden officials from the previous White House who raised those questions and wondered if the president was even consulted about his legally binding signature being signed onto documents. And so I think it's a question that everybody in this room should be looking into, because certainly that would propose perhaps criminal or illegal behavior if staff members were signing the President of the United States autograph without his consent.
And what was even better was her answer after that when she said, it's your job as journalist, because Caitlin had, I think she said something along the lines of, do you have any proof of this? Of course, always taking the side against Trump. And she said, well, you're a journalist, that should be your job, which is true. And, as journalists, it's our job to obviously challenge the narrative and really dig deeper. And I think that this is a real story. I think that this is something that is obviously a cover up. And I know you, Emerald, are going to go deeper into this. And so am I. Maybe I would like to file some and Freedom of Information Acts and really find out what happened, because some of those pardons were just so devastating, especially those, I think, of the January 6th committee that really just pardoned what a lot of people saw to be horrible crimes. People shredded documents. They got rid of documents of that whole committee that taxpayer money was spent on. And, there was a lot of evidence that could have been exculpatory for a lot of January 6th defendants. So that's a real due process violation. So, that was really criminal. So I think that a lot of people would be very relieved to find out that perhaps Liz Cheney, perhaps Benny Thompson, or even maybe Dr. Fauci actually aren't pardoned at all, because Joe Biden had no idea that he was pardoning them.
I would be very happy to find that out for all of the above. Kara Casanova, thank you for the excellent reporting. I know you're going to dig into this more, and we'll have more on this for our audience probably within this week. Thanks so much, Kara.
Thank you.
Well, Friday night evening news dump, you probably didn't notice. Big promotion for one Derek Hines, who was promoted to the role of first assistant U.S. attorney. He will now supervise the Office of Criminal, Civil, and Administrative Divisions, which is a really big job. But unfortunately, this is at best another example of Team Trump's ongoing vetting issues, because Hines was, according to the nonprofit research organization Marco Polo, one of the 3 key prosecutors in the quote, Hunter Biden laptop hangout, slap on the wrist charade. So to get the first assistant U.S. attorney position is, well, it's a disgrace in their words, and I have to agree, rewarding bad behavior of an acolyte of Louis Freeh. And that's true as well, which was noted in 2023 by Article 3 Project's Mike Davis. And guess who Hines' new boss is? A political appointee named David Metcalf, who worked for the notorious Rod Rosenstein at the DOJ. Before that, he was at Covington LLP. That's the firm whose security clearances real Donald Trump pulled just a couple of weeks ago. And joining us now to dig into this deeper is Marco Polo's Garrett Ziegler. Garrett, you called this an unforced error. That's being very generous, because let's be honest, you had to know. They have to know. So I can't see this as accidental. Why did they promote Hines? Why?
Unforced error in terms of the upper leadership, because we don't know yet what all went on. I know for sure that Metcalf, the nominee to be the head honcho, he's known Derek Hines for years, because before Metcalf worked with Rod Rosenstein at the Main Justice, he was one of the lead deputies for Rosenstein back at the District of Maryland U.S. Attorney's Office. So this is, like you said, swamp watch. This is subterfuge within Trump term 2. We saw this throughout the first term. There's no reason for this. Somebody suggested on X, well, maybe they're mining him for intel. Okay, but then why promote him? The district that they're in, Emerald, is probably top dozen most important districts in the nation. It has Philly. It's the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. Huge metro area, very important district. As the first U.S. attorney, first assistant U.S. attorney, Hines is overseeing civil, criminal, and administrative enforcement actions within the entire district. Metcalf is the only guy above him. When I say that he was one of the main 3, you got to understand, David Weiss was the special counsel, and he only had 2 prosecutors underneath him, Leo Wise and Derek Hines. Derek Hines was the lead prosecutor, the first chair trial lawyer at the gun trial in Delaware in June of 2024. The big thesis here is that Derek Hines is good friends, and Louis Freeh was his former boss, good friends with Louis Freeh, one of the most corrupt people in the history of the Bureau, which is a hard list to make. He was the director of the Bureau under Clinton. And secondly, this was the one who tried to get Hunter to sign off on a slap on the wrist plea deal. The only reason why it wasn't agreed to was the judge started asking questions because she realized the plea deal in July of 2023 was unprecedented. So why would you give the guy who tried to give Hunter Biden the plea deal a promotion? This cannot stand. He's got to go immediately. I mean, this guy should be in private practice doing some ambulance chasing. He does not need to be the top career guy at the EDPA. This isn't the District of Montana. This is Philly, one of the largest metro areas in the country. They have a lot of white collar crime too. So we're the first ones to know this. You know why? Because we have a Google alert for Derek Hines' name. Okay. This went on their website without a press release at like 5 p.m. on Friday. And we're the first ones to break this nationwide.
You know why I know that they know what they're doing and that this isn't just like an accident is because it went out at 5 p.m. on a Friday. That's when you dump
Yes.
news you don't want anybody to see.
I agree in that I also put on Twitter that they didn't even they didn't even have a press release about this, and I'm surprised that they even gave Hines a bio on their website, because under the Biden admin, the first U.S. attorney really didn't even have he had the listing of his name, but there was no bio. Hines, on the other hand, is so proud that he puts his volunteer firefighting gig on his online bio, like he's this Boy Scout helping save the nation. This is embarrassing. And I sent the tweet that Mike Davis made in 2023 to Mike Davis. I said, look, another beauty from the EDPA. What are they doing? This, by unforced, I don't mean that Metcalf isn't to blame. He is. Metcalf is the problem where it starts and stops, because he's a Covington and Burling shill. What I'm saying is it's quite possible that Mizell and Bondi didn't know about this. If they did, it's even worse. But for the next 12 hours or 24 hours, we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And if this isn't fixed, I'd love to come back on your program to talk about this.
Let's go ahead and schedule it for tomorrow. Let's see what happens in 24 hours. Some other good news related to Hunter Biden, though. President Trump has addressed his Secret Service detail he has in South Africa not long ago. Let's listen.
Sir, there were 18 Secret Service agents protecting Hunter Biden in South Africa this weekend. Who's paying for that, and do you plan to revoke the Secret Service protection?
Well, we have done that with many. I would say if there are 18 with Hunter Biden, that will be something I'll look at this afternoon, okay?
Sure.
I just heard about it for the first time. So you have 18 Secret Service going, where is he exactly?
In South Africa.
In South Africa. And South Africa, you know, is on a watch list, you know that. Because what they're doing to people is brutal. And I've stopped having money go to South Africa, you know that. Billions of dollars. So he's in South Africa. That's very interesting. All right, I'm going to take a look at that. Thank you very much.
I have a feeling he won't have that detail much longer.
No, and again, going to his watch list comment, which is very fair because they're killing white farmers by the dozens. It's atrocious. It's black radicalism, Marxism over there. Our contention is not that Hunter Biden doesn't have threats against him. He might, and that's not our argument. Our argument is that Joe Biden has 3 federal pensions, and they're fat. He's got one from the Senate for his 36 years from Delaware. He's got one from the vice presidency and one from POTUS. And the POTUS pension's higher than any other federal pension. Why isn't Joe picking up the tab? We hear ad nauseum about how great of a father is. Joe just loves his adult son so much. He's my only surviving son. Pay for his security detail. Why is he putting that on the taxpayers? So our argument's not that Hunter Biden shouldn't get security in South Africa. They do hate white people over there, generally speaking. Our contention is I shouldn't be footing the bill for this, and you shouldn't either, Emerald. This is a joke. And we found these photos and provided them to the media, and they're going to be part of our forthcoming motion for attorney's fees, because our case with Hunter Biden was dismissed with prejudice. I haven't talked to you since then, but the judge dismissed it with prejudice. His own daddy's appointee was so disgusted at Hunter's antics that he didn't give Hunter what he wanted. Hunter wanted without prejudice, so if he got a new benefactor, he could sue me again. But his case against me is dead in the water. All we want now is reimbursement.
Yeah, I hope you get it. We actually updated our audience on that, and he's actually trying to get another case, a lawsuit he has filed in California, moved to the District of Columbia, where he feels like he'll fare better, because as you noted, he did not fare very well with that Biden appointee there in California. Look, let's go ahead and schedule for tomorrow. Let's see what happens in regards to these 2 stories over the next 24 hours. Hopefully we'll have good news on both fronts. And both are related to your efforts. Yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, I just want to send a message to Hunter's wife, because I know she's watching this, because I hire somebody to watch all my interviews. You can't lose us, okay? No matter where you go, no matter what safari you take in Johannesburg, we are going to document your taxpayer-funded escapades. So you can be mad at the agents all you want. It ain't going to change anything.
Yeah. So Melissa Biden, if you're watching, you heard it straight from Garrett Ziegler's lips.
Yes.
Good to see you. We'll see you tomorrow.
Godspeed.
You, my friend, need Native Path collagen. Made with only type 1 and type 3 collagen fibers, these are the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen in your body. It's found in cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, your gut. Type 1 and 3 provide maximum benefits without the need for unnecessary fillers. Also, Native Path collagen has no additives, no artificial sweeteners. It's also completely flavorless, which is important because Native Path collagen can be added to anything. I put it in my coffee. Also, because of its special peptide formulation, it mixes more easily than any other collagen I've ever tried, and I've tried a lot. But the best part, Native Path offers amazing bundle deals. You can get 3 or 6 packs at a fraction of the price of other brands. Plus, they have a 365-day no-risk guarantee, making Native Path the trusted choice. All you have to do is visit getnativepath.com/truth. That's getnativepath.com/truth to start your transformation.
Because I'm sure Biden didn't have any idea that it was taking place. And somebody was using an Autopen to sign off and to give pardons to, as an example, it's just one example, but the J6 Unselect Committee. Think of it, they gave pardons with an Autopen. I don't think Biden knew anything about it. And what they did is they deleted and destroyed all of the information that took them over a year to get. And the reason they did that is because the information was very incriminating about them.
And what is surely to be frightening news for the likes of former representatives Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, both of whom received bizarre preemptive pardons from former President Joe Biden. President Donald Trump has confirmed that his government is not going to recognize the legality of those pardons. It all comes down to the use of the Autopen, which we've been talking about a lot here on The Absolute Truth, along with our colleague, the current OAN Pentagon correspondent, Gabrielle Cuccia. Initially and exclusively broke that on our show over a year ago, as I showed you earlier in the show. Because it has been proven that former President Joe Biden signed so many executive orders and pardons, such as the ones granted to Cheney and Kinzinger with an Autopen, those pardons are now in, shall we say, legal jeopardy, especially because Biden likely had no idea what he had signed.
I didn't do that. And he's arguing with me. I said, Mr. President, respectfully, could I go out here and ask your secretary to print it out? We'll read it together. You definitely did that. And he goes, oh, you talk about natural gas. Yes, sir. He said, no, you misunderstand. He said, what I did is I signed this thing to, we're gonna conduct a study on the effects of LNG. I said, no, you're not, sir. You paused it. I know. I have the terminal, the export terminals in my state. I talked to those people this morning. This is doing massive damage to our economy, national security. It occurred to me, Barry, he was not lying to me. He genuinely did not know what he had signed.
So then who was the acting president signing all those pardons and executive orders that Mr. Joe Biden clearly was unaware of? Now, our friend Gabrielle Cuccia explained that to us just last week.
I would be looking at the staff secretaries. It was Neera Tanden. President Biden had 3, and that's pretty normal for the turnover. But Neera Tanden, Stephanie Feldman, and Jessica Hertz.
In other words, Susan Rice, we all know that name, was probably in charge of the White House. And joining us now is a victim of the Biden regime's political warfare. His name is Adam Villarreal. He is the author of Capital Punishment, a J6 fugitive story. Adam, it's amazing to meet you. I have talked to so many J6ers on this show. I've been blessed to, interact with so many J6 defendants. You and I have not got to talk before. And so before we get into some of the more current events, your story is an unusual one. You went on the run, right, when they started rounding up J6ers and stayed on the run for quite some time.
Yes, that's correct. My older brother ended up turning me into the FBI a day after January 6th events. And then I was on the run until I received the pardon from President Trump.
When you received that pardon, how did you feel? Did you believe that you didn't really have to run anymore? I'm sure that was surreal because this had been going on so long.
It was definitely a big adjustment. I have to give credit to Jim Hoft over at Gateway Pundit, Believe it or not, my wife and I, before we even had word that all ancillary charges were dropped, we decided we needed to make a statement because people needed to know about the abuses that were going on in the judicial system. And so we ended up taking a photo, that photo right there in front of the Capitol before I was even cleared. And when we reached out to media, they ended up running with the story, and that started off this whirlwind journey that my wife and I have been on. We've been in a constant motion since the inauguration, and it's culminated in me becoming the co-chair of the Civil Liberties Division of the On Your Six Foundation. We're doing some really great work. We are currently opening a 1,000-bed homeless veteran shelter and shelter for homeless J6ers, and we want it to be a full-scale rehabilitation so that they can return some dignity to their lives.
That's amazing. I want to talk more about what you're doing, but I will say, Adam, I just texted another J6er over the weekend because I feel like I'm seeing so many posts from J6ers that I know showing that they're at a point now that, the initial pardon, the celebration of the pardon has worn off. Being free has kind of, they've settled in, and now they're having to try to acclimate to life. And it's very difficult to do. They were treated horribly. Many have PTSD. Many are veterans, right? Who probably had some PTSD trauma from being at war. And then that was compounded by their kind of treatment, many of them being held in solitary confinement during their time as being held as J6ers. So there's a real need there. It's not just going back to normal life for them, right, Adam?
It's absolutely true. My wife and I have talked about this a lot. We both have been suffering from PTSD symptoms. I was a veteran myself. I was a naval nuclear engineer when I was young, and it was hard. Every camera, every person that we saw was a potential threat. We had to work so hard and learn so many things to try to avoid the FBI, to try to make it through. My little brother, Gavin Villarreal, was also a J6er, and we used to talk through burner phones and a really complicated series of things about how we really had to make it through to let people know that the Biden regime was illegitimate and it was tyrannical, and that maybe if we could stand up, and we suffered grievous hardship through it. My wife miscarried. We ended up getting blackmailed. I'm 6'3", and I ended up getting down to 148 pounds. I was skeletal. I lost everything. I used to work corporate management when I was in Los Angeles, making six figures, and to go from that to being essentially a homeless person, having to look over your shoulder constantly. It was a radical shift. And I'm glad you bring up the fact that people are still suffering from PTSD. It's the strangest feeling. You wake up in your bed, and even though you're safe, it feels like they're still after you, and you wake up in sweats, and it has been tough. But I want to encourage people that there is help out there, and we're trying to work with the best and the brightest in J6 to provide some relief for people. If you have symptoms, you're not alone.
Where do they go, Adam? How does someone, because we do have a lot of J6ers that watch the show, or families of J6ers, how does someone in need get in touch and take part in your services?
So we have a couple of things. If you go to the On Your Six Foundation, it was founded by Chaplain Jos Messias. He's the Veterans for Trump gentleman. He has a website up, onyoursixfoundation.org, and you can get relief and help there. My wife and I are also doing an initiative called the Homeland House Foundation. It's just homelandhousefoundation.com. And our goal is to get a plot of land free and clear for every January 6ther, just as a gift to help try to restore dignity and get their lives going again. We're trying to do some really great work down here. I've been working with my very good friend, Brian Mock, who's been doing a lot of work on the FSA. And he's trying to show a real strong support for prison reform. We have a press release coming up on the 27th in Washington, D.C., and, we're trying to bring together bipartisan support to talk about how there is a lot of people through the FSA Act that President Trump passed that are still in prison and should not be. They were the ones who, for time served and for activities towards the good of the community, they could be released early. But Mr. Mock was the first case that the judge ruled on, and he was told that we can't rule on these cases because if we do, it's going to flood the courts. All these people that are wrongfully in prison are going to try to get out. And so by highlighting the January 6 cases, it allows us to kind of be a hammer and to take it to some of this corruption that's been going on and really highlight it.
Yeah, Brian joined our show not too long ago, actually, Adam, to talk about his experience and how he had kind of, by his own homework and his own effort, been the first J6er to actually be released based on the First Step Act. Just in case our audience isn't following FSA, that's the First Step Act that was passed during Trump's first term. Adam, real quick before we run out of time, I want to talk about how we get restorative justice. And I have to ask you, based on what Donald Trump has said, we've talked about your all's pardons, we talked about the J6 pardons. Donald Trump, based on a lot of exclusive reporting we've done here at The Absolute Truth related to the Autopen, we were kind of the first to dig into it starting last year, suggests that some of those pardons, or those pardons signed or not signed, likely by Joe Biden, may be null and void for people like Adam Kinzinger, Liz Cheney, the unselect J6 committee that were so adamant about putting you all in jail and throwing away the key, right? Do you think that as a J6er who's now been pardoned, do you believe there should be accountability? Should these people be investigated the way you all are and potentially face criminal charges and even jail time?
I absolutely do, and I'm glad that you brought that up. We have a legal team here that's working night and day to go by hand reviewing every single J6 transcript page by page and finding evidence of judicial and prosecutorial malfeasance. And so I want to put a call out there to all the listeners. If you are a J6er and you have your transcripts, please contact us through the website, and we can process it for you. We can look over it and we can help find this evidence to bring to bear. If we don't have leverage on these people, oftentimes as they do, they're going to play politics and wiggle out of any type of accountability. And we want people to know that if they could do this to us, they can do it to you. You really have to understand that this isn't about just January 6th. This is about the future of the judicial process for the American nation. And if we can help bring that message to bear, that would satisfy our hearts and help us feel like we're really making a difference.
Well, and like you said, I mean, if there's no accountability, what keeps them from doing it again in the future? So it's absolutely necessary. And your call to action for transcripts, I'll remind my audience of that. And Adam, I just want to say congratulations to you and your bride on finding each other. I'm sorry to hear about the losses that you have endured, but it sounds like you'll have a very bright, promising future, and you're obviously very focused on giving back to others. So for that, we're appreciative. And I know that we'll be talking again in the future because you have so much going on that we want to keep our audience in the loop on. Thank you so much, Adam. It's lovely to meet you.
Thank you so much, Emerald. It was a pleasure to be here.
Are you looking for monthly income without the risk of stocks because you don't feel like maybe you're well versed enough in the stock market? Well, here's something you won't hear about on CNBC. There's a unique way to collect royalties directly from America's most productive oil fields. No exploring, drilling, or operational headaches required. You simply collect checks month after month. And the best part? You can get started with just $25 through any brokerage account. The Oxford Club's chief income strategist, Mark Lichtenfeld, breaks down what he believes is the #1 oil royalty play for 2025. Simply visit RobinsonOilBoom.com now for more information. That's RobinsonOilBoom.com. RobinsonOilBoom.com now for more information. That's RobinsonOilBoom.com. In what must be filed under promises made, promises kept, the Trump administration has successfully removed 200 of the most violent members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Agua from the United States and deported them to El Salvador, which, as you can see, has given these vicious criminals who entered the U.S. illegally during the Biden regime a warm welcome. But the corporate press is up in arms, of course, over the deportation of these violent criminals they'd rather keep in our communities. As you can see from this recent panicked Axios headline tear, the Democrats are accusing Donald Trump of having defied a federal court order to return the narco terrorists to the United States. Too bad for the Democrats that the Trump administration is simply outmaneuvering their best efforts to stymie what are legal presidential orders of deportations. You see, before the federal judge's order putting a stop on the deportation flights could reach the White House, the Trump White House's deputy chief of staff, a noted immigration hawk named Stephen Miller, you'll remember him from the first term, ensured that the planes carrying the 200 Trendiagua members were already over international waters and therefore not subject to the federal order. Of course, this raises all manner of questions as to the legality of the federal court order itself. For their part, the Trump administration says they welcome the Supreme Court challenge to the presidential deportation orders, believing that the Supreme Court will overrule, I'm not as confident perhaps, the lower court's call to stop all deportations. Joining us now is constitutional attorney Dave Shistokis, who is going to walk us through the legality and perhaps the lack of constitutionality of what's happening in our court system. Dave, thanks so much for joining us today, because I feel like this is really maybe the most important discussion we could have today and that we'll have all day. It's about these judges telling the Trump administration what they can and can't do. This seems to me like we're in a constitutional crisis here because judges are pretending as if they're presidents, giving orders from the bench. Your thoughts?
I would suggest to you that's a good way to put that. The fact is that this judge acted like he was the commander in chief for the United States over the weekend. He does not have the authority to be commander in chief. He was actually approached by the American Civil Liberties Union to certify a class of immigrants of illegal aliens that fall under the definition of Trendiagua. Who was designated by the Trump administration both as a terrorist organization, but they're also something else that everybody seems to be missing when they talk about the Alien Enemy Act, which is of 1798. Everybody's talking about it and saying that it's a wartime provision and that it requires a declaration of war and some other circumstances like that. While the first sentence talks about a wartime situation and it talks about declarations of war, the second portion says, or a foreign power or hostile power is engaged in activities that are predatory incursions or invasions, and it says or. Of course, these days, I don't think we've declared war since World War II on anybody. We never declare war anymore. We don't use that. Congress loosely uses authorization of use of military force to do things like in Iraq and Korea and Vietnam, but they don't declare war. So if you required a declaration of war, this Alien Enemies Act that allows the president to designate certain class of individuals who are not legal residents, not legal permanent residents of the United States or citizens, specifically actually not citizens. It allows them to declare them as alien enemies for any number of reasons. And what I think people have missed in the presidential executive order regarding Trendiagua is, for all practical purposes, they outline the circumstances by which Trendiagua is, for all practical purposes, an arm of the Venezuelan government. And as an arm of the Venezuelan government and importing things that are killing Americans and actually invading America and taking over apartment complexes, not only in Denver but elsewhere. Here in Chicago, there's been face-offs of the Trendiagua and members of the local community. Local gang members are getting in arguments with Trendiagua about whose territory it actually is. So no, there's an actual invasion, assuming that the presidential finding that this gang is, for all practical purposes, an arm of the Venezuelan government. Venezuela is waging war on the United States. And that is something that can trigger the application of the Alien Enemy Act.
You know what? I think it's so important that you pointed that out, because that's not something that is highlighted. Even a lot of alternative or conservative media don't really understand what this so-called gang really is. And I had a Venezuelan source tell me exactly, Dave, what you just told me months ago. Told me, look, you don't understand. This is not just a gang, okay? This is a paramilitary force that is run by the Venezuelan government, run by the cartels, right? It's basically a paramilitary force for the Venezuelan cartels that run the Venezuelan government. So we're at war with the Venezuelan government because of how they actually work with Trendel Aragua. And you bring it up as it applies to this particular piece of legislation. Now, in this case, though, had the judge issued this order sooner, or had the flights not left, perhaps we wouldn't have the outcome that we saw, where they actually made it to El Salvadoran soil. Some are saying that Stephen Miller outsmarted, outmaneuvered the Democrats. I would say in this case, he particularly probably did. That's a question that came up, though, today earlier in the briefing with Caroline Levitt. She was asked about this, the plane being over international waters, et cetera, and the judge's orders. And this is how she responded. Dave, let's listen.
On the timeline of the flights, you keep talking about the judge's written order, which hit the docket Saturday night at about 7:26 p.m. But he issued a verbal order before that at about 6:45 and 6:48 p.m. based on the court hearing. A verbal order from the bench. Does the White House feel the need to comply with a verbal order from this judge?
Again, as I said, all of the planes subject to the written order of this judge departed U.S. soil, U.S. territory before the judge's written order.
But what about the verbal order, which of course carries the same legal weight as a written order, and said for the planes to turn around if they were in the air?
There's actually questions about whether a verbal order carries the same weight as a legal order, as a written order, and our lawyers are determined to ask and answer those questions in court. Sean.
It's a bit surreal that you have a correspondent there arguing that, essentially Caitlin Collins was arguing that, they should have turned the plane around midair and brought these hardened, paramilitary, criminals back to the United States. We'll just kind of leave that alone. But let's get to the orders, okay, Dave? There's this verbal order, there's written orders. This is not the only Trump issue or Trump executive order that is facing legal challenges. There's an illegal challenge related to the ability to fire federal workers, right, to let go of the probationary workers. A judge waited on that, countered the Trump administration's move. What does the Trump administration do in this situation where they are getting injunctions issued by liberal activist judges? This is not constitutional. So do they have to comply? Should they just go ahead and do what they're doing? How do they navigate this environment they find themselves in judicially?
Well, a couple of things. In the first instance, as to the verbal relative to the written order, of course, I don't know. I wasn't in the courtroom. I didn't see a transcript of what actually transpired in the courtroom. But typically, when the judge is going to give a great deal of detail, the verbal order is not in effect until the written order is there, because then all the parties know what it is that they're supposed to be involved with. And the written order that appeared, the written minute order that appeared, so some interesting things, not the least of which is it certified a class of individuals. That is, it certified, apparently, the judge decided he's going to allow every member of Tren de Aragua to be represented in his courtroom, whether they've been apprehended or otherwise, whether or not they have any claim. And so I would suggest that, yeah, he way overstepped his bounds when he certified a class. There's now now pending legislation in Congress to turn back some of these judges that are trying to control the whole country, when, of course, there was only really 5 individuals that had originally been in front of the judge for his case to consider. And yet he certified a class of all Tren de Aragua anywhere in the United States, which is just clearly that's overstepping his bounds. That's somewhere beyond. We have the Article 3 authority of a judge goes to what they call a case or controversy. And a case or controversy means that you have to have certain specific people with certain specific claims against somebody else, as opposed to just a whole lot of folks that we think might be harmed. The judge doesn't have authority to proceed on a case like that, and he did. But nevertheless, the folks theoretically subject to his order were outside his jurisdiction at the time that he issued the order.
So, but going forward, I just really want to nail this down because this is a question I have. I keep saying Trump and the administration should just ignore these rogue judges because I think they're rogue. Should they? Can they? Can they go about their business and ignore these orders?
Well, they do so at their peril. We're better off, obviously, if they can, in fact, do their best to comply with whatever orders there are until they're properly dealt with on appeal. It's, I mean, theoretically, it could go full Andrew Jackson. It says Marshall's made his ruling, and now let's see him enforce it, because of course the judges don't have the authority of the marshals. They don't have the power of the purse. They don't have any way to enforce an order except by the force of their logic, and they're following the law. However, I think, and it does seem like the president has gone overboard in many respects to follow crazy judicial orders and to get them on appeal. And when you get them on appeal, then you're in a situation where you come to the appellate court with clean hands. Go to the appellate court. Listen, we're following this, even though we don't think it's legitimate or correct. So it puts them in a stronger position on the appellate court, and it puts them in a stronger position over time. On the other hand, these are dangerous people, as the president said yesterday. I would suggest that this is an unusual circumstance because while they apparently are Venezuelan citizens, we didn't send them to Venezuela. So we may very well be renting space from El Salvador for some place to keep them in the meantime. And that doesn't mean that they're necessarily outside the reach of having a writ of habeas corpus. If there's if there's a particular individual that can say, no, I'm not part of it, and can prove that I'm not part of this gang, that I've got nothing to do with this, that I was in the country legally, then that should perhaps be reviewed. However, relative to this particular law, there's Section 24 of the Alien Enemies Act, and Section 24 of the Alien Enemies Act indicates that U.S. Marshals and other folks under the orders of law enforcement may execute what's called a president's warrant. And this law doesn't require the president to go and get permission from a court or go to get an indictment to execute these matters for folks that are alien enemies. And it's really, really very rare over time for the courts to second guess the president when it comes to national security matters. And so he'll win. He'll win eventually.
Eventually.
Yeah.
But we've only got a certain amount of time here, Dave.
In the meantime, we have folks that are causing danger to American citizens by being out on the streets.
Especially in your city of Chicago.
Yeah.
Especially in Chicago. You know it well.
Yeah.
You referenced Andrew Jackson, that maybe Trump will go full Andrew Jackson, which made me laugh a little bit because it is one of the presidents that Trump will reference, from time to time, right? I think Andrew Jackson's in amongst his favorite list. And look, I think it's time that Congress adjusts the judges and start hauling them in for impeachment proceedings against the judges. I think that's something that needs to happen because we have a real problem in our courts, and this is just putting it on major display for Americans, as Trump had a mandate to do what he's doing, and these judges are trying to keep him from doing it. Thanks so much, Dave Shustokas, for giving us a little bit of our, legal and constitutional lessons, as you often do. You're the first person we think of when we have a constitutional question. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you so much, Emerald. Good to see you.
In a much appreciated turn away from the Biden regime practice of simply accepting and condoning criminal behavior, the Trump FBI has announced it will be launching a federal investigation into the fundraising practices of the left-wing non-government organization ActBlue. Now, you'll remember ActBlue was involved with multiple suspicious fundraising behaviors that likely illegally swayed multiple elections in the Democratic Party's favor over the last several years. And it isn't only the FBI that is opening investigations into ActBlue. It is now also the likes of Representative James Comer and our friend, Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs. Now, according to Arizona Central, quote, ActBlue is a fundraising platform that Democrats use to collect donations online. It has raised more than $16 billion since its founding in 2004. Republicans in Congress are investigating ActBlue over claims that the site skirted campaign finance laws. Congressman Biggs' request to the FBI is the latest escalation in the push to look into the platform. Elon Musk believes that ActBlue is at the center of the harassment campaign directed against his properties as a sort of punishment by the left for his support of President Donald Trump.
Yes, at least some of it is organized and paid for. I think by domestic, basically left-wing organizations in America, funded by left-wing billionaires, essentially.
Is it like ActBlue or what?
ActBlue is one of them. Arabella, the classic. It's funded by the blue, basically the left-wing NGO cabal.
We're now joined by the investigative journalist and president of Election Watch, Mr. Peter Bernegger. He's the man who's been at the forefront of exposing ActBlue. And honestly, Peter, I don't know if it hadn't been for your work, I'm not sure we would be getting this investigation today. So I just want to acknowledge that before we get into other matters, Peter, because you were really the driving force behind looking at ActBlue and revealing how much money was being laundered through there. And remember when you talked about it as it related to Fonnie Willis on our show, that kind of broke the internet, Peter.
Well, when we worked with James O'Keefe and he helped big time expose this, and I always have to mention Chris Gleason was instrumental in breaking this open, 5-6 years ago. But we finally got it going, and then but I'll disclose to the audience is that we started helping the 20 state attorney generals, and they joined over time, of course, back in September of 2023. And it was an uphill battle to convince them that something was wrong. And of course, the FEC tried to paper over it, saying, Bernegger and his team don't understand our accounting method. Well, yeah, we understood it fully. And it's like double, triple, quadruple bookkeeping is what it really is. So one of the disturbing facts that's coming out of this, though, is that the terrorist connection, like Elon Musk has stated, against his companies, but also I'll give credit to Matt Brainard. He came out in 2020 to the FBI and filed a written criminal complaint to the FBI. And unfortunately, they wouldn't take any action. And that was ActBlue participating in criminal money laundering to Hamas and other named terrorist organizations. And Mr. Brainard has published that on his Twitter account, and people can read the actual documents that he filed. And of course, the problem was back then is that Joe Biden and Merrick Garland were in office, and they covered it all up. So that's why all this has been taking so long. Thankfully, the state attorney generals picked it up. But I'm going to disclose something to you. The reason why ActBlue, if people don't know, the end of January, the FBI got involved, and ActBlue found out about that. So in February, you started having their top executives, 7 of them were reported by the New York Times as bolting from the company. And then I think it's hilarious is that the attorneys, the corporation counsel, which of course are ActBlue attorneys who work in-house, they all left. And I think the last one got kicked out. And one of his internal messages was talking about whistleblower policy. So it looks like somebody was, giving the goods on ActBlue from the inside, in addition to the work that our team has been doing for so long. So it's very exciting. Representative Andy Biggs from Arizona made a written referral, criminal referral, to the United States Department of Justice. State Attorney General Ken Paxton has made a referral. I know that U.S. Congressman Brian Stiles and U.S. Senator Ron Johnson have also urged a criminal investigation into ActBlue, among others. And we always focus on ActBlue, which, of course, are the largest. However, I have to point out, though, there's at least 300 other similar platforms, including WinRed, Emily's List, the DNC, the DCCC. So there's many others that need to be shut down besides ActBlue.
Yeah, perhaps that'll be included eventually in this investigation. I want to ask you: have you been in contact with, in communication with Comer and Biggs now that they've got this going, or had you been in the past?
We're in contact with the investigators who then feed it up the food chain, and I'll say it was difficult in the early get-go to convince the congressmen and senators who we talked with and spoke with directly, not their aides. We spoke directly with them. And finally, I guess we positioned it correctly, along with all the other media across the nation that broke the story, from again, James O'Keefe to others like Gateway Pundit, et cetera, and your show. Finally, it clicked, is that, well, no wonder us Republicans are running against these Democrats, and they constantly out-fundraise us on a national scope. And, say our Republican congressman might raise $2 million. ActBlue would always be raising $5 million for their competitor. And the light bulb went on. As soon as they figured out that it's affecting them personally, then they started to care. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, totally surprised by that. So surprised. What was interesting to me is how Elon Musk noted, and as you noticed, the Hamas connection. Elon Musk thinks that ActBlue could be funding some of the protest activities against him. We're also seeing a lot of people be swatted and pizza deliveries. That is obviously an organized campaign. I've noticed is more people have been retweeted by Elon Musk than you would say just conservatives or big conservative accounts. I think there's a tie there. Do you think that could be money used for these activities, something through ActBlue like that?
Of course it could be, because ActBlue also funds NGOs and other nonprofits. So it's money laundering in this situation. Smurfing is structured money laundering. So it can go from one entity to the next to the next. We've traced it going through 10,000 entities, and that's not an exaggeration. And then that money, we could show that, and then that money ends up in somebody's political campaign. Particularly the Democrats. So these NGOs are getting their money, some of them, through ActBlue, and then it goes the other way around too. Some of the NGOs are actually funneling money into ActBlue, like USAID. So then that money's coming from the U.S. Treasury to the USAID to ActBlue, and it might go in between a couple of entities in between there. But what's interesting then is that this ties into our current April 1st election that's happening here in Wisconsin, which has tremendous national importance. It's for the state Supreme Court in Wisconsin, and the liberal candidate is Susan Crawford. And guess who's come on to support her campaign is George Soros. We trace this. Bloomberg, Reid Hoffman, co-founder of LinkedIn, and J.B. Pritzker. What are they doing in getting involved in a state Supreme Court race in Wisconsin? And her number one platform that she uses to raise money is ActBlue. So here comes full story again, is that it's not just on the national level of a federal campaign like Joe Biden or Harris or somebody. This is showing right here a state Supreme Court race that's using ActBlue. We've already identified Smurfs, who are the victims, and smurfing money going into her campaign. I published them on my Twitter roughly 10 days ago or something. And there's a whole list of them showing that these victims are being, their identities are being stolen by Susan Crawford using ActBlue platform to fund her campaign.
And when my audience may say, well, why is Soros and the other names, Reid Hoffman, so invested in that state Supreme Court race? We'll explain to you, if she wins over the Republican in the race, Schimmel, right?
Yes.
It's likely that Donald Trump will lose the House. Explain that quickly for our audience, the stakes.
Sure. The liberal Susan Crawford was caught in a meeting, in a Zoom meeting, in an attendance of a group where one of their main focuses is to flip, gerrymander, I'll call it rig, the U.S. congressional districts in the state of Wisconsin, causing the loss of 2 Republican seats, meaning President Trump could this year or next year lose control of the House of Congress before there's any other election. So that's how important this election is. This could, April 1st, which is in 2 weeks, is going to, could possibly kill Trump's agenda.
Very high stakes. Peter, let's touch back next week on where the race currently stands, because as you said, all eyes should be on this. And thank you for your work and for helping us get to this point where we actually have an active FBI investigation into a bad actor like ActBlue, and hopefully it'll filter down the list to the other ones you named. It's not just ActBlue. Thank you so much, Peter Bernegger.
Thank you.